All right. Welcome back, everyone. It's 8:46. We're a minute on schedule, I guess. So I see a lot of familiar faces, so that's great. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us for this session. And for the rest of you, I had a big room. I don't know about the other mentors, but thank you for joining us for the first time. I hope you guys will find our sessions fun and interesting, and you'll come back for the next two. And without further ado, we'll just go through the agenda real quick. So we'll start off with a very, very brief introduction to the team, just so you know who you can reach out to in case you ever want to participate in more events or even help us organize some other events like our dear mentors in this chat. Then we'll be having a sharing from our guest speakers, Haja, and Mai. So they'll be talking about today's topic, relationships at work. Then we'll wrap up. So things will be a bit different today for the people who usually join us. We'll wrap up first, do all the necessary admin, get you guys to join in on our Telegram and Facebook groups. And then we'll break out into our individual rooms, which you were already in just now. And, it'll be free and easy. Feel free to leave then. We're not holding you guys back, completely virtual. Just click the big red button on your screen. So with that, just like to introduce you guys to the team. And also to what we're doing. So essentially, we've put together these workshops because we thought that it would be a great way to build community with you guys, support our alumni members, and we had to do it virtually because of COVID, but we hope that so far you feel like you're making new friends and new connections. After all, it's international connections. We've touched on many topics from finding a job to starting your job, and now we're at the point where we're at work and we might need some guidance on how to build relationships at work. We have 2 more sessions coming up, so these sessions happen every 2 weeks. So we hope to see you on the last 2 for the year. So our team, these are our lovely faces, a little less glamorous than how we look now. We've Haja, who's presenting today, Paul, who I can't see, Alice as well, over there at SMU, myself, Ada, whose video is not on either, and Essa, who's also on Campus Green. So if you guys have any questions, we're in the breakout rooms, but feel free to reach out to us at any point in time if you want to get more involved. Now on to today's session. We have our guest speakers. Our first guest speaker is Haja. So Haja works at Salesforce right now as a technical consultant, and pretty fitting because he graduated from SMU Information Systems in 2018. We also have Mai, who's working in a Canadian bank, and she graduated in 2014. She's one of our mentors as well, so hopefully we'll have a great session and you guys can reach out to either of them or any of us after this. So jumping straight into it, today's topic is relationships at work. So before we really dive into that, I think we're gonna run a quick poll. And you guys will see it pop up on your screens right now. And we'll just find out, where we are today. It's been quite interesting for us as we've been running this sessions where we expected more undergrads, had way more working adults and vice versa. But I guess it just goes to show that no matter where you are at in your professional life or personal life, you always have something to learn and something to come back to. All right. 90% of people have voted, and we're just waiting for one more person. Who are you? Can't shame them because you can't see who's voted. All right, okay. So, there are now more people joining the call. So one person hasn't voted still. Okay, it's all right. The poll results are really, really clear. We have most of you guys as working adults, been working for a while. So for all of you, thank you for joining us on a work night. I know some of you had just some free time to spare, and so I thank you guys for joining us. For our fresh graduates, we hope you learned something new today, and for our undergrads, well, you're starting early, so I hope you find some usefulness out of this, and I know we'll be tying some of the stories back to working life, working at SMU through our project. So hopefully you find something useful to use on your group mates. We all know we have some really difficult group mates every now and then. Okay, so with that, building a relationship at work 101. So I believe we'll have Mai to start with her sharing.
Thanks, Anna. So firstly, I would like to say that I don't know whether I'm qualified enough to be sharing today, because just in my breakout room alone, we had alumni all the way back to 2009, 2011. So they graduated even before me, and they probably are more experienced than me in sharing these things, right? However, these sessions are really just more of an experience sharing. So these are from my perspective and very much catered towards the industry that I've been in or my own experience. Therefore, whatever I'm sharing today, feel free to bring up in reflection of your own experience as well. Maybe it's relevant, maybe you might disagree with it. We can always discuss later during the breakout room, but hopefully you take away something today. Just before I dive into some of the points or some of the aspects that I'll be sharing, I will share a bit of background on myself as well. I'm Vietnamese, for those of you who don't know, and about 2 years ago, I was fortunate enough to be able to take up the Singapore citizenship. So for those of you who are international students, which I'm guessing that a lot of people here are, feel free to reach out to me afterwards if you're interested to hear about how that journey is like. I was in SMU from 2010 to 2014 with a degree in business management and economics. And I was the president of ICON, or the International Students Committee back then, which was a fantastic experience. And some of the learnings back then are still very much relevant to the work that I do right now. After graduation, I joined a graduate program at a bank, and pretty much I've been, in the banking industry since then, except for a 1-year stint at a fintech startup, which, to be honest, didn't work out so well, but it was still a superbly interesting experience that I wouldn't trade for anything else. And I do believe that in your 20s is the time for you to kind of experiment and see what suits you the best before you settle on something that make you happy. So currently I'm, as the introduction say, a relationship manager and vice president at the Toronto Dominion Bank. And in terms of what I'm going to be sharing today, I kind of summarize it into 6 key points, right? But even then, I think it's too much. A lot of times we listen to a lot, but what I would like you to take out from my sharing today are the top 3 points that you think are the most relevant to you, and that you probably will spend a bit of time developing on or think about. And maybe there's something that we can discuss later in our breakout room. So first, are your colleagues your friends? And this is one of the first point that I want to bring up, because I think this is one of the fundamental difference when you transition from the life in school to life at work. Back when you're in school, right, everyone's your friend, whether it's your CCA mate, your classmate, and whatnot. I think at work, relationships are a lot more nuanced, and people have different agendas, different politics maybe. So just take, for example, a story of a friend of mine. So she came to me recently and she said that, hey, something happened at work. Someone whom I thought was my friend, let's just call this person Mary. So Mary and my friend are really close friends. They hang out together, they go out outside of work, etc. And one day my friend's boss came to tell her that, hey, I'm taking away all your accounts and give it to Mary, because I had a chat with Mary and she said that she's more qualified for the portfolio than you are. So my friend kind of thought like, okay, I thought this person is my friend, but this kind of like a betrayal of friendship here. But she also admitted that what Mary was saying is right, that Mary is more qualified than she is. So the point that I'm trying to say is, at work, I think that you will meet a lot of people who kind of look out for their own interest, and they might do things that at certain point of time seems like an act of betrayal as friendship. But it's just very much, people looking out for themselves. They're not trying to attack you or put you down, but when they're looking out for themselves, it can very much comes up as such. So not to scare you, there will also still be, people at work whom you can be friends with, and that's an important part, right? Because that will help you to do your work better and help you to be happier as well if you have people whom you can call friends at work. But the point that I'm trying to raise here is that it probably requires a little bit more sensitivity and selectiveness when it comes to interacting with your colleagues, a certain degree of professionalism that, like you don't want to share with them all about your personal life, for example. And on that point, so I'm quite sticky about the fact that I tend not to be friends with anyone on social media if they're my colleagues. Once I leave the company, all my ex-colleagues are my friends on Facebook, on Instagram, etc. But before that, not really. So that's kind of something that I think would be interesting to share, because that's probably one of the first things that you'll notice when you enter the workplace, right? And so for those of you who are still in school, how does that apply to you? I would encourage that, as you probably have taken one of those personality tests, and it helps you to understand yourself more. But I'll also encourage you to read about other types of personalities, because it helps you to understand other people and to read them better. The very fact that, for example, you're an icon is a great thing, because it's a place for you to interact with people from different background and different diversity, and that just help you to be more attuned to reading people, right? And seeing who you can trust and whatnot, and what you can share with them, and maybe there are those that you just want to maintain a purely professional relationship with. That brings me to my second point, how to handle conflicts. Now, naturally, there'll be people that you click with, that will be your friends, and then there'll be those that you kind of just don't click with. And this comes back to the point of knowing how to read people, right? For those that you don't click with, just keep it professional, like don't get into personal conflict. Now, about professional conflict, most of us, when we think about conflicts, we think that is a bad thing. But I would challenge you to change your mindset. And the first time that I really thought about this was during my first job. I remember, so I was in the front office, and obviously as a salesperson, your job is to bring in deals. But then in a bank, there's always a compliance, a credit department that kind of try to stop deal, right? Their job is to manage risk. So sometimes the best way to manage risk is to just not do any business at all. Or at least that's how I felt at that point in time. So I remember when I had a chance to have a one-on-one talk with someone who is very senior in the organization, I brought up this point. And his response surprised me. He said, "Oh, it's really good that you're having conflicts. That means the structure is working, because that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to fight for your business, bring in revenue. The credit, the compliance people are supposed to highlight the risk. So this is healthy conflict." And I would encourage you to think about this way. If you get into professional conflicts with your colleagues, and this is probably what you heard before, right? Like, don't take it personally. They are doing their job and you are doing your job. So it's fine. It's a good thing that you are both trying to stand your ground and trying to bring in different perspectives. Even in our government, right? PAP, Workers' Party, the reason why you have different parties is to have different perspectives. It doesn't mean that someone is more right than the other. And to this point, I will also encourage you to read a book that has helped me to approach conflict and negotiation in a very different way. It's called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. He's an ex-FBI negotiator, and he writes about how to approach. So firstly, he says that every situation in life is a negotiation, whether you know it or not. And secondly, there is a way to approach negotiation that make it feel like a win-win, and that uses empathy, and at the same time you can be pleasant. So when we think about someone who is a very good negotiator, we think that person must be so tough and aggressive and all that, right? And I myself, I'm not an aggressive person, and I'm very uncomfortable with conflicts. I'm very uncomfortable with confrontation. So this book has really changed myself in thinking about how to approach it, and it's also helped me in my most recent move to negotiate my salary, which I guess all of us would be interested to know.
I think I would second this recommendation. My entire department, the sales team as well, our territory manager gifted us the book, and he thought, well, it's not just for sales. Obviously, you're negotiating every single day, but again, on the personal note, there's a you're forming relationships and you're trying to figure out where the right balance of give and take is. We have a comment here from Winifred who said that whether you're more cautious or not depends on the industry, profession, and personal preference. I'd like to weigh in just really quickly where at Salesforce, I was very shocked that lots of people, the expectation is that you start following each other on Instagram uh, pretty much straight away, at least within your level. And then as you move up, then you can start following more people. I don't know what it's like for you, Mai.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and thank you for bringing that up, Anna, and Winnie as well. Winnie was in my room, and she's the person that made me feel like I'm not qualified to really share today. She's my senior, so thanks, Winifred. Winifred is also in HR, right? So I think her comments is a good observation of the fact that it really depends on the industry and the company and the culture that you're in, which is also why I try to give a bit of background on myself. So if you're in a similar industry, you might want to take that a little bit more closely, but if not, depends on where you go. Take it with a pinch of salt. So yeah, agree totally. If that's the culture or the tradition of your company, then you kind of, do not have to be so hard on yourself about that. But
So
yeah,
when
I think in the banking industry is a little bit more formal.
Right. So when it comes to formalities and culture, it's actually, I think, a good chance to talk about something that we prepped for, right? Which is about finding mentors and the right support network that you could have outside of friends, right? So how do we go about doing that, Mai?
Yeah, that's kind of I think that's the last point that I'm going to talk about networking outside of your organizations. But I think you were also asking about, besides friends, like how do you network with your manager or some people who are more
Managers,
seniors than you? Yeah,
teammates, yeah. You're
yeah,
surrounded by people.
yeah, yeah. So one of the points that I will emphasize, right, which comes up in my third point, is that questions are your best talk. And I remember when I first started working, I didn't feel like asking questions because I didn't know a lot. And I probably felt like if I ask any questions, maybe I'll look like I don't know much and I'm stupid and all that, right? But at the same time, it's also exactly the time when you can ask questions when you're younger, because as you become more senior in your career, people expect you to know more, so you lose that chance to ask questions. At the same time, questions are also the bridge to you understanding and knowing not only your colleagues but your seniors, and give you that chance to know people. So the first time that I was really encouraged to ask questions is when I observed this very senior person who worked with me when I was a Standard Chartered. He would ask really basic questions because he was trying to understand about the specific product that I was doing. And I see that, although he's such a senior person, but he's humbled himself down to ask these questions. And along the way, that actually gives me respect, because you also see a lot of leaders who doesn't know much. They don't know much, but they also don't ask that many questions, right? So I would encourage everyone to ask questions. That's a way of knowing people, and of learning a new subjects as well. Which brings me to the next point, and next slide also, about finding mentors and sponsors. So a lot of people believe that you should have a structured mentoring program, or that you should approach someone and ask, hey, can you be my mentor? That doesn't really work for me. Again, this is just different perspectives. But for me, asking someone to be your mentor kind of put pressure on that. I think mentoring comes every time you have a one-on-one session with someone and you ask qualified questions. When you ask good questions, you learn from that person. So the next time you have a chance to talk to someone who's 5-10 years ahead of you, the next time you get to chat to someone who is senior, just make sure you ask the right questions, make sure you're listening. And that's what mentoring is all about, right? At the same time, I also read a book that encouraged me to think about this in a different way. So this book kind of say that 30% of the people that you interact with should be people who are a lot ahead of you, 5 to 10 years ahead of you, or even more. About 30 to 40% should be your peers. And then the rest should be people who are probably not as experienced as you. So you learn to give back to them as well. And if you look at the people that you interact with today, if you don't have people who are a lot ahead of you, then maybe, it's time to kind of think about, okay, maybe I should think about the people that I want to develop towards, people that I admire, and try and set up some time to catch up with the person, to have one-on-one. And it doesn't have to be a formal session, right? But just the very fact that you are exchanging ideas with them, you're spending more time with them, their way of thinking and the experience would rub off on you, and I think help you to be more ahead of where you are.
Yeah. So actually, while we were prepping, I think Haja started talking about coffee chats, which I think he'll be addressing right after this. But I just wanted to segue a little and share that, networking doesn't just exist within your organization. I know some of you work in small companies. I started in a startup. And if you can't find people to learn from within your company, now is a great chance to go outside and there's a lot of networking events, a lot of associations. Icon Alumni Association is one of those. And I think Mai touched on taking it seriously, and I think Haja has a lot to say about that. I don't know how many non-serious coffees he's had and let it slip through his fingers. Haja?
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to the next slide then.
Oh, yep, sorry.
So just maybe a small introduction about myself as well. So I graduated from SMU a couple of years ago, back in 2018. But my journey was a little bit different. Where before coming to SMU, I did a startup with a bunch of my friends. Right after we have this mandatory national service in Singapore. So for a couple of years, I was working with them because well, high school wasn't a good time for me, so I didn't do really that well in my grades, and I couldn't get into a university in Singapore at that time. So I realized, maybe I have to start my own business, make my own ends meet. And a couple of years later, SMU came offering a seat, and I think in Singapore, having a degree is kind of important. I think it's hard to deny that it kind of adds a lot of value to your portfolio as well. So I took it up, and when I went to school, I can safely say I did the very bare minimum to study just to survive. I was more involved in a lot of other co-curricular activities. I think people in this call will vouch for the stuff that I've done. Uh, it's a
Or
it was
not done.
yeah, all not done. I think it was a journey. I think a lot of people were quite. Even I was shocked that I managed to graduate within 4 years. I think it was quite a miracle on my end. But again, I was also part of like a lot of committees. I took part in a lot of. I was in a theater production for a couple of years. I used to. I used to be a vice president at one of the committees as well. I used to be a president in another committee as well. I did a lot of stuff. Basically, I was everywhere and anywhere. Um, so then after I graduated from SMU, I joined a tech sector. I was part of Mastercard for a while. I did data analytics there for a year. I didn't like the job because I'm more of a spoken person. I like to speak to people. I like to see people face to face. I like to interact with them a lot. So I left the company, and then I joined Salesforce a year later, and I've been enjoying my life ever since. So my role mostly pivots around talking to people on a daily basis, especially in this time where COVID means you're on your laptop almost. I would like to say 24/7, but in some situation it has happened to me where I've been awake for really long periods of time because my role demands such drastic measures as well. I'm speaking to customers, trying to appease them, trying to build relations on a daily basis, making sure that nothing goes sour. Whether is it with my customers, whether is it internally within my company. Um, so all these experiences are what I'm about to share with you. And again, as to echo what Mai mentioned, these are my experiences. But I feel that it is something that can be shared amongst people across all walks of life, no matter how long they have worked. I think it's kind of overlapping to most people. So, and this is something we can discuss in the breakout rooms as well. So, yeah, let me kick things off, right? So, what Anna mentioned about coffee breaks and those lunch offers, yeah, I'm one of those people that really enjoys coffee breaks and lunch offers when people ask me. I like to take this time to go and meet them and be personal with them. Like it's always nice to be having in a one-on-one environment and a two-on-one environment where people are more honest that way. They feel more comfortable if they come to you and they ask you, want to go for a cup of coffee, just take it. I think there's no harm in just hearing what they have to say. Why would they ask you out? I think it's always nice to hear their perspective, and I think the fact they asked you out means that they value what your opinion could be, and I think that's something that I think anybody would appreciate when to to feel that whatever you say is being valued. I think that's another feeling of its own. So I would always suggest that when people do ask it, if if there's an opportunity for you to go, if there's nothing stopping you from doing it, then go for it. I think it would be a good experience most of the times anyway. So unless you know the guy is asking for some other funny business, then yeah, you should avoid those. But when it's from a place of good intent, then yeah, I would recommend you to take those offers. Yeah, so speaking about networking as well, I think Mai touched on it quite extensively, but what I would like to say is, when you're in your work environment, I know it's always important to try to climb the corporate ladder. I think it's normal. I think everybody who's in a very corporate environment wants to do that. Hence, you want to be in good relations with your senior management, with your bosses' bosses, and whoever. But I've always feel, and I have felt over the past years that I've worked, is that it's important to always talk to people at the same level as you, and people who are in lower levels, people who are below in the lower levels as well, because it helps a lot. Like, imagine when you're going up for promotion, it's not only the impression of what the senior management has of you that matters. Eventually, you might become a manager to these people as well, and their their opinion of you matters a lot as well. You don't want to neglect them just because you want to climb the ladder. And eventually they could be your friends, and you have been working with them for long periods of time. You don't want to just push them away just because you want to achieve your goals. So you always make time for everyone. It doesn't necessarily mean you neglect them, but also put in effort to reach out to people who are on the same level as you in terms of work, people who are in the lower levels of you. Maybe when interns come and want to talk to you, just take the opportunity and just talk to them. I think it's always nice to let people know that you're a nice, approachable person, and that helps a lot.
Haja, I have a question
Yes, please.
here. Well, not me. Someone asked the question.
Okay.
How do you do? I mean, you say here senior folks. So I
Yeah.
thought it was a great time to ask. How do you build relationships with the boomers in the office?
Yes, I okay, so I personally, I'm pretty good with all kinds of people. I think that's just my personality because I generally like to talk. But when it comes to boomers, you need to understand that their mindset is pretty different. They're kind of fixated in the one right way of doing things. And let's face it, because that's the way they grew up, right? You don't expect. I mean, you would want them to be a bit more flexible in their thinking, but you can't expect them to change those thoughts and their thinking style. So my advice is, you should just ask them questions, because in most instances, boomers like to talk. Again, maybe I'm a boomer myself, I'm not sure, but
Almost there.
almost there, right? Yeah, but in most instances, boomers love to talk, and when you ask them questions that really allows them to share about their experiences, they love it. And of course, you may feel bored after a while, but I mean, the fact that you're already engaging them and making them answer these questions and letting them take the lead in those conversations, I think that is job well done, because I think that's where a lot of people kind of lose out, where they don't know how to talk to these people. So that's one of my tactics where I personally use when I know that this guy has been at different companies, he has done different roles. I just ask him how was life like at the company. He takes 5 minutes to answer that. I ask him another question. He takes another 5 minutes, and just like that, one lunch session is over. So
Yeah, which I
again,
think really ties in very well to Mai's last point,
yes,
which was, your questions are your best talk. I think people
exactly.
generally like talking about themselves. I think one of the other things that we were discussing was about how to maintain relationships now that you're friends with everyone. Oftentimes, well, not friends, let's say acquaintances and professional network with everyone. If inevitably you end up working with them on projects, and you do have to make certain promises along the way. You had some advice on how to tackle these kind of relationships as you go along your work.
Sure, yeah. So what I would do is, maybe we'll move on to the next slide then, because that kind of tackles those questions,
Right.
that train of thought. So when you already are in a good term with when you're already good terms with people, or you're just starting out a new role at a new company, more often than not, you want to go and get some stuff. You want to get something on your plate, because new hires generally don't get a lot of work to do. They're just given a lot of training time. But but when you go in, you want to make an impression. You kind of ask people, right? You take the initiative and you talk to people like, "Hey, man, is there anything I can do to help?" So you get some stuff, you get some work on your plate, and you realize that it could be more than you can chew. It's something that you do you and I have faced that, especially in my role, where when I joined, I had a lot of instances where I have no idea what I had to do, and it was quite scary because I had to do a lot of self learning, and after which I have to deliver. And more often than not, I've only catered time to the delivery part, but not for the self learning aspect. So there goes my weekends sometimes, or my night times where I spend hours reading through articles and resources just to understand what I have to deliver. But this is why I think this advice is even for myself. I kind of it's like telling myself that I should follow this advice as well, where if you can't do the work in time, I think it's always good to let people know that you can't deliver it. Be honest and upfront with them, where and not before it's too late. Like if you are like hours away from your deadline and you tell them, then of course people will be frustrated. But you should always know at your own expense, like it's going to take some time. You already know, and it's like what, a few days before the deadline. Ask, you reach out to your bosses, to your project teammates, and let them know. Listen, I'm struggling, and you'll be surprised how well they respond to you being open with them with this kind of information. Because, my opinion, it takes courage to tell someone that you can't get the job done within the stipulated time. It's not an easy thing, because in most instances it kind of makes you look like as though you're not capable enough. But trust me, people will think you're more than capable because of that. Because it shows that you're willing to willing to to put aside your ego, for instance, and ask for help, and let them know that you can't do it, and ask them for more time. At least they know that you're thinking about them. You're putting the team instead of you at the forefront. So that's something that I think is very important, and I myself should actually follow this advice in many instances over the past few months, and hopefully I will take it as well. I think this
I
is something
think
I value. Yeah.
I think what you're actually saying reminds me a lot of group projects at SMU where you're just last minute frustrated at that one person and wishing he had said something earlier. I feel like at work, people tend to appreciate this kind of honesty and openness a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And not we're talking about workplace most of the time, but all these advice I've been giving myself and mine, it is really translatable to even like the university level, where if you are participating in group projects, or if you are in like a committee that handles like events or runs workshops and whatever, all these advice applies. So it's really quite a generic advice, but many more often than not, people kind of forget these simple stuff. And I think it's good that we just take note of these things and don't forget about these, because these are like the basic stuff, right? So,
Yeah.
and moving on to my last 2 points, I think I'll just run through them really quickly. um it's always important to be uh honest about whatever advice you have to give. You don't want to side with people just because they will it's better to have them on your side, because and just because of that reason you support them. You shouldn't be like that. It's always good to be honest with everyone, be fair to everyone, regardless of what levels of position they are, and also be open. Like, you don't have to hide what you feel. Of course, you have to be tact. You have to have some tact in telling them feedback and constructive criticism, and you don't want to be blunt about it. But yeah, that's in that essence, it's always good to be upfront with all these kinds of information, because people will respect you for that. And when you hide stuff, and you, for lack of a better word, when you try to suck up to people, it's very obvious, especially in a work environment. People will know. You'll be surprised at how many people like can label others as suck ups just because they've seen the guy do it once or twice. And it's not even, and sometimes it's so like you wouldn't even believe you had done it, but people can recognize they have done it. It's incredible. So my advice is, don't be like that. And lastly, it's always about having humility, being humble. I think no matter where you are, what position you are in, how far you are up in your job hierarchy and wherever, it's always good to have humility. People respect people who are humble, and people respect people who allow them to do not show off that they have all these experience, and they have more knowledge and stuff over you. Even though for matters like and even in this session, I may not be the best person, I might not be the most qualified to talk about this, but to able to accept that, and for people who actually have the experience to know that, okay, you know what, I may know more stuff, but this is his experience. So to be humble and to accept that in itself is really something that's very respectable, and I admire people who are like that as well. And I think that's really a very admirable trait for anyone to have. So always stay humble no matter where you are in life. And yeah, that comes to my last point. And
Yeah.
I hope that talks about, hopefully that makes you a great co-worker as you move on to your work life, I suppose.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so thank you, Haja and Mai, for your sharings. I think there were two very distinct things that we tackled here. One is kind of, understanding that it is a negotiation. We are, relationships are all about give and take, and being able to understand how to find that dynamic is very, very important. And I think, Haja, with your sharing, a lot of it is really seizing the opportunities that you have, but also like the best way to connect with people also ties in with what Mai shared, which is being curious, being humble, and always kind of seeking new knowledge in every situation that you're in. And I think to your last point, both you and Mai are incredibly humble. I can, if I had to take a shot for every time you've said that, we shouldn't take your advice, I'd be really drunk right now. But I think everyone here really appreciated your sharing, and hopefully we'll get a lot of questions in the breakout rooms. So I think, to everyone in the room, that just about wraps up today's session. Felt like a really short one, felt like just a casual coffee chat. So hopefully that gave you an idea of your next coffee chat. And while you're thinking about who you're gonna ask to next, just want you guys to take note that we're actually hosting our next session on the 19th of August. So there are a few things you might want to take note. Take out your calendars and start putting this in, and then take out your calendar and write down who you want to ask out for coffee and figure out how you can pick their brains. Our speakers for that session will be Ada, who's a lawyer, and knows all about work-life balance, and Nguyen as well, who's a really fun guy, and knows plenty of work and gym balance, I would say. So yeah, hopefully, we've covered a little bit about finding a job, coming to work, adjusting to work, finding your footing and finding your network at work. And now that you've maybe settled in, finished all the certifications and trainings that Haja mentioned, it's time to start figuring out how to regain your work life balance. Trust me, for the most part, it is a lot better than it was at SMU. And with that, we've wrapped up our session. We're going to try something new and have you guys go join the breakout rooms again. But before we go, I'd like to invite Mai and Haja to say maybe one last parting piece of wisdom before we go.
Oh, okay.
Mai?
So
Mai, would you like to start?
Yeah,
What's
sure.
big advice?
I think for me, so what got me thinking also is during the breakout room, right? That probably so today we have an overwhelming participation from older alumni. And with the COVID-19 situations, it has probably affected more people than not. And I would say that in times like this, networking outside of your organization, talking to people outside of your industry or even within your industry, but from another company would give you ideas and connections that you never know how it might come in helpful, right? For me as well, except for the first job, every single time when I've changed job is always because of some connection that I've made in the industry that at that time I had no idea would come in useful again. So that's kind of just the closing word of what I want to say. Ask a lot of questions, be curious, be open.
Thank you, Mai and Haja. Parting words of wisdom.
yeah, likewise, I think what Maya mentioned kind of summed up what I was thinking as well. Like it's always good to have people around your side. You should always be open to people wanting to come and talk to you, and you wanting to go and talk to people as well. Um, I feel that having these kind of networks really goes a long way, because honestly, you never know when or how, in which manner they'll come and help you out. I think that's the beauty of having a network. That's the reason why you should always just keep expanding it, as and when you can. It's up to you how you want to treat them. Do you want to just keep them as someone that you see as just colleagues, or want to keep them as someone who you see as your friend? It's your call, but I think in the end, it's up to you to decide how you want to drive your own workplace relationships. And I think on our part, me and Mai have given as much as we can in terms of experience, and I'm pretty sure all of you have had a lot of experience as well. So yeah, hopefully, whatever you take away from today kind of value adds to you as you go back to work. For most of us, at least when we go back to work from tomorrow.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So, with those amazing words of wisdom, I'd like to invite everyone to turn your cameras on as we take our virtual group shot and then send you off on your merry way.